Question 108. Which Azure service allows you to create, assign, and manage policies to enforce different rules and stay compliant with your service level agreements? Option A, Azure Security Center. Option B, Azure Policy. Option C, Azure Blueprints. Option D, Azure Trust Portal. And the correct answer is option B, Azure Policy. Explanation. Azure Policy helps to enforce organizational standards and to assess compliance at scale. Through its compliance dashboard, it provides an aggregated view to evaluate the overall state of the environment, with the ability to drill down to the pre-resource, pre-policy granularity. It also helps to bring your resources to compliance through bulk remediation for existing resources and automatic remediation for new resources. Common use cases for Azure Policy include implementing governance for resource consistency, regulatory compliance, security, cost, and management. Policy definitions for these common use cases are already available in your Azure environment as built-ins to help you get started. Next question. With Azure you can scale your applications and create highly available services. Option A, Information Protection. Option B, Bastion. Option C, Kubernetes. Option D, Load Balancer. And the correct answer is option D, Load Balancer. Explanation. From the official documentation, load balancing refers to evenly distributing load, incoming network traffic, across a group of backend resources or servers. Why use Azure Load Balancer? With Azure Load Balancer, you can scale your applications and create highly available services. Load Balancer supports both inbound and outbound scenarios. Load Balancer provides low latency and high throughput and scales up to millions of flows for all TCP and UDP applications. Next question. A startup has deployed a set of virtual machines which are critical for their day-to-day operations. They need to ensure their availability even if a single data center goes down. One of their interns has suggested that deploying the VMS through a skill set would solve the problem. Do you agree? Option A, no. Option B, yes. And the correct answer is option A, no. Explanation. This answer does not specify that the skill set will be configured across multiple data centers. So, this solution does not meet the goal. Azure Virtual Machine Scale Sets let you create and manage a group of load-balanced VMS. The number of VM instances can automatically increase or decrease in response to demand or a defined schedule. Scale sets provide high availability to your applications and allow you to centrally manage, configure and update many VMS. Virtual machines in a skill set can be deployed across multiple update domains and fault domains to maximize availability and resilience to outages due to data center outages and planned or unplanned maintenance events. Next question. Which of the following services would you use to embed the ability to see, hear, speak, search, understand, and accelerate decision making into your apps without having any machine learning expertise? Option A, Azure Events Hub. Option B, Azure Machine Learning Studio. Option C, Azure App Service. Option D, Azure Cognitive Services. And the correct answer is option D, Azure Cognitive Services. Explanation. Cognitive services bring AI within reach of every developer without requiring machine learning expertise. All it takes is an API call to embed the ability to see, hear, speak, search, understand, and accelerate decision making into your apps. Next question. Select the option that is false for resource groups. Option A. You can add or remove a resource to a resource group at any time. Option B. You can deploy up to 800 instances of a resource type in each resource group. Option C. The resources in a resource group can be located in different regions than the resource group. Option D. Resources may be moved from one resource group to another. Option E. Resource groups can be nested. Option F. A resource can only belong to one resource group. And the correct answer is option E. Resource groups can be nested. Explanation. Resource groups can't be nested. That is, a resource group cannot exist inside another resource group. It is, however, possible is to link resources from other resource groups within a resource group. From the official documentation. It's amazing summary. Please do read. Next question. Azure Advisor has the ability to provide recommendations for Azure ExpressRoute. Option A, no. Option B, yes. And the correct answer is option B, yes. Explanation. From the official Azure documentation. Advisor is a personalized cloud consultant that helps you follow best practices to optimize your Azure deployments. It analyzes your resource configuration and uses telemetry and then recommends solutions that can help you improve the cost effectiveness, performance, reliability, formerly called high availability, and security of your Azure resources. Advisor provides recommendations for application gateway, app services, availability sets, Azure Cache, Azure Data Factory, Azure Database for MySQL, Azure Database for PostgreSQL, Azure Database for MariaDB, Azure ExpressRoute, Azure Cosmos DB, Azure Public IP Addresses, Azure Synapse Analytics, SQL Servers, Storage Accounts, Traffic Manager Profiles, and Virtual Machines. Azure Advisor also includes your recommendations from Microsoft Defender for Cloud, which may include recommendations for additional resource types. Next question. Which of the following services can facilitate the deployment and scaling of containers? Option A, Azure Kubernetes. Option B, Azure Logic Apps. Option C, Azure Cognitive Services. Option D, Azure Active Directory. And the correct answer is option A, Azure Kubernetes. Explanation. From the official Azure documentation, Azure Kubernetes Service offers the quickest way to start developing and deploying cloud-native apps. With built-in code to cloud pipelines and guardrails. Get unified management and governance for on-premises, edge, and multi-cloud Kubernetes clusters. Interoperate with Azure Security, Identity, Cost Management, and Migration Services. Next question. When you cancel an Azure subscription, your resources are immediately deleted permanently to free up space. Option A, no. Option B, yes. And the correct answer is option A, no. Explanation. From the official Azure docs, when you cancel an Azure subscription, a resource lock doesn't block the subscription cancellation. Azure preserves your resources by deactivating them instead of immediately deleting them. Azure only deletes your resources permanently after a waiting period. Next question. Which of the following requires the greatest security effort on your part? Option A, Infrastructure as a Service. Option B, Database as a Service. Option C, Software as a Service. Option D, Platform as a Service. And the correct answer is option A, Infrastructure as a Service. Explanation. IaaS is, in effect, where a cloud provider hosts the infrastructure components traditionally present in an on-premises data center, including servers, storage, and networking hardware, as well as the virtualization or hypervisor layer. From a security perspective, this offering is probably the closest to traditional in-house IT infrastructure. Indeed, many companies will effectively move existing server payloads to IaaS either partially or completely, resulting in a hybrid solution. And it will require much of the same security tools as a result. Next question. Choose 3 components of Azure SLAs. Option A, service credits. Option B, performance targets. Option C, users targets. Option D, uptime and connectivity guarantees. And the correct answer is option A, service credits. Option B, performance targets. And option D, uptime and connectivity guarantees. Explanation. A service level agreement or SLA is a formal document that provides specific terms that state the level of service that will be provided to a customer. Microsoft's Azure SLA defines three primary characteristics of Azure service: performance targets, uptime, and connectivity guarantees. It should be noted that the free and shared tiers of many services do not come with an SLA. Next question. When a subscription expires, the trusted instance of the Azure AD service remains, but the security principals still maintain access to Azure resources. Option A, yes. Option B, no. And the correct answer is option B, no. Explanation. From the official Azure docs, an Azure subscription has a trust relationship with Azure Active Directory. A subscription trusts Azure AD to authenticate users, services, and devices. Multiple subscriptions can trust the same Azure AD directory. Each subscription can only trust a single directory. One or more Azure subscriptions can establish a trust relationship with an instance of Azure Active Directory in order to authenticate and authorize security principals and devices against Azure services. When a subscription expires, the trusted instance of the Azure AD service remains, but the security principals lose access to Azure resources. Next question. Dash is capable of sending encrypted traffic between an Azure virtual network and on-premises location over the public internet. Option A, an application gateway. Option B, a firewall. Option C, network security group. Option D, a VPN gateway. And the correct answer is option D, a VPN gateway. Explanation. From the official documentation, a VPN gateway is a specific type of virtual network gateway that is used to send encrypted traffic between an Azure virtual network and an on-premises location over the public internet. You can also use a VPN gateway to send encrypted traffic between Azure virtual networks over the Microsoft network. Each virtual network can have only one VPN gateway. However, you can create multiple connections to the same VPN gateway. When you create multiple connections to the same VPN gateway, all VPN tunnels share the available gateway bandwidth. Next question. A platform as a service solution that has already been deployed cannot be scaled up or out without redeploying it. Option A, true. Option B, false. And the correct answer is option B, false. Explanation. You can always scale your PaaS solution up or out without redeployment. The very beauty of PaaS is that it allows you to avoid the expense and complexity of buying and managing software licenses. The underlying application infrastructure and middleware, container orchestrators such as Kubernetes, or the deployment tools and other resources. You manage the applications and services that you develop, and the cloud service provider typically manages everything else. Next question. Which of the following services meets both criteria? Number 1. Monitoring of traffic patterns 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, looking for indicators of attacks. Number 2. Detailed reports in 5-minute increments during an attack, and a complete summary after the attack ends. Number 3. Engagement of dedicated team for help with attack investigation and analysis. Option A, Azure policies. Option B, a network security group. Option C, DDoS protection. Option D, Azure information protection. And the correct answer is option C, DDoS protection. Explanation. From the official Azure documentation, distributed denial of service attacks are some of the largest availability and security concerns facing customers that are moving their applications to the cloud. A DDoS attack attempts to exhaust an application's resources, making the application unavailable to legitimate users. DDoS attacks can be targeted at any endpoint that is publicly reachable through the internet. Azure DDoS protection enables you to protect your Azure resources from denial of service attacks with always-on monitoring and automatic network attack mitigation. There is no upfront commitment, and your total cost scales with your cloud deployment. Next question. Your Azure account contains several policies and you wish to group or organize them. Which of the following can help you achieve this? Option A, Initiatives. Option B, Azure Active Directory. Option C, Resource Groups. Option D, Network Security Groups. And the correct answer is Option A, Initiatives. Explanation. From the official Azure docs, an initiative definition is a collection of policy definitions that are tailored towards achieving a singular overarching goal. Initiative definitions simplify managing and assigning policy definitions. They simplify by grouping a set of policies as one single item. For example, you could create an initiative titled Enable Monitoring in Azure Security Center with a goal to monitor all the available security recommendations in your Azure Security Center. Question 123. Dash is a cloud-based platform for creating and running automated workflows that integrate your apps, data, services, and systems. Option A, Azure DevOps. Option B, Azure Logic Apps. Option C, Azure Events Hub. Option D, Azure App Service. And the correct answer is Option B, Azure Logic Apps. Explanation. Azure Logic Apps is a cloud service that helps you schedule, automate, and orchestrate tasks, business processes, and workflows when you need to integrate apps, data, systems, and services across enterprises or organizations. Next question. The Azure Question Answer Forums is a paid service. Option A, yes. Option B, no. And the correct answer is Option B, no. Explanation. The Question Answer Forums is a free service offered by Azure. There is no cost associated with it. You can get answers to common questions and even filter by product to limit the results. Next question. Having a hybrid cloud solution in place could be useful when regulations or policies do not permit moving specific data or workloads to the cloud. Option A, no. Option B, yes. And the correct answer is Option B, yes. Explanation. From the official Azure documentation. When organizations move workloads and data to the cloud, their on-premises data centers often continue to play an important role. The term hybrid cloud refers to a combination of public cloud and on-premises data centers to create an integrated IT environment that spans both. Some organizations use hybrid cloud as a path to migrate their entire data center to the cloud over time. Other organizations use cloud services to extend their existing on-premises infrastructure. When to use a hybrid solution? Consider using a hybrid solution in the following scenarios. Number 1. As a transition strategy during a longer-term migration to a fully cloud-native solution. Number 2. When regulations or policies do not permit moving specific data or workloads to the cloud. Number 3. For disaster recovery and fault tolerance by replicating data and services between on-premises and cloud environments. Number 4. To reduce latency between your on-premises data center and remote locations by hosting part of your architecture in Azure. Next question. Which of the following enables centralizing your organization's file shares in Azure Files while keeping the flexibility, performance, and compatibility of a Windows file server? Option A, Azure File Explorer. Option B, Azure File Sync. Option C, Azure File Storage. Option D, Azure File Manager. And the correct answer is Option B, Azure File Sync. Explanation. From the official Azure documentation, Azure File Sync enables centralizing your organization's file shares in Azure Files, while keeping the flexibility, performance, and compatibility of a Windows file server, while some users may opt to keep a full copy of their data locally. Azure File Sync additionally has the ability to transform Windows Server into a quick cache of your Azure file share. You can use any protocol that's available on Windows Server to access your data locally, including SMB, NFS, and FTPS. You can have as many caches as you need across the world. Next question. Which Azure service should you use to correlate events from multiple resources into a centralized repository? Option A, Azure Blueprint. Option B, Azure Event Hubs. Option C, Azure Log Analytics. Option D, Azure Cosmos DB. And the correct answer is option B, Azure Event Hubs. Explanation. From the official documentation, Event Hubs is a fully managed real-time data ingestion service that's simple, trusted, and scalable. It streams millions of events per second from any source to build dynamic data pipelines and immediately respond to business challenges. Keep processing data during emergencies using the Geo Disaster Recovery and Geo Replication features. Integrate seamlessly with other Azure services to unlock valuable insights. Allow existing Apache Kafka clients and applications to talk to event hubs without any code changes. You get a managed Kafka experience without having to manage your own clusters. Experience real-time data ingestion and micro-batching on the same stream. Next question. Dash copies your data synchronously 3 times within a single physical location in the primary region. Option A, locally redundant storage. Option B, worldwide redundant storage. Option C, zone redundant storage. Option D, geo-zone redundant storage. And the correct answer is option A, locally redundant storage LRS. Explanation. From the official Azure docs, Azure Storage always stores multiple copies of your data so that it's protected from planned and unplanned events, including transient hardware failures, network or power outages, and massive natural disaster. Redundancy ensures that your storage account meets its availability and durability targets even in the face of failures. Redundancy in the primary region. Data in an Azure storage account is always replicated 3 times in the primary region. Azure Storage offers 2 options for how your data is replicated in the primary region. Locally redundant storage LRS copies your data synchronously 3 times within a single physical location in the primary region. LRS is the least expensive replication option, but isn't recommended for applications requiring high availability or durability. Zone redundant storage ZRS copies your data synchronously across 3 Azure availability zones in the primary region. For applications requiring high availability, Microsoft recommends using ZRS in the primary region and also replicating to a secondary region. Next question. A team in your organization wants to implement a solution involving basic artificial intelligence, but they have basic API and programming knowledge or background to implement this solution. As an experienced Azure architect, which of the following would be your suggestion? Option A, Azure DevOps. Option B, Azure Active Directory. Option C, Azure Cognitive Services. Option D, Azure Machine Learning Studio. And the correct answer is option C, Azure Cognitive Services. Explanation. From the official Azure documentation, Cognitive Services brings AI within reach of every developer and data scientist. With leading models, a variety of use cases can be unlocked. All it takes is an API call to embed the ability to see, hear, speak, search, understand, and accelerate advanced decision-making into your apps. Enable developers and data scientists of all skill levels to easily add AI capabilities to their apps. Next question. You are looking to link resources together in your on-premises environment and within your Azure subscription, but don't want the connection to travel over the internet. Which of the following can you use? Option A, Azure ExpressRoute. Option B, Azure Sentinel. Option C, Azure Point-to-Site VPN. Option D, Azure Bastion. Option E, Azure Site-to-Site VPN. And the correct answer is option A, Azure ExpressRoute. Explanation. From the official Azure documentation, Azure Virtual Networks enable you to link resources together in your on-premises environment and within your Azure subscription. In effect, you can create a network that spans both your local and cloud environments. There are 3 mechanisms for you to achieve this connectivity. Number 1. Point-to-site virtual private networks. The typical approach to a virtual private network connections is from a computer outside your organization back into your corporate network. In this case, the client computer initiates an encrypted VPN connection to connect that computer to the Azure virtual network. Number 2. Site-to-site virtual private networks. A site-to-site VPN links your on-premises VPN device or gateway to the Azure VPN gateway in a virtual network. In effect, the devices in Azure can appear as being on the local network. The connection is encrypted and works over the internet. Number 3. Azure ExpressRoute for environments where you need greater bandwidth and even higher levels of security. Azure ExpressRoute is the best approach. ExpressRoute provides a dedicated private connectivity to Azure that doesn't travel over the internet. Next question. An Azure firewall has the ability to encrypt data at rest as well as in transit. Option A, yes. Option B, no. And the correct answer is option B, no. Explanation. A firewall is used to mainly filter the traffic. From the official Azure documentation, Azure Firewall is a managed cloud-based network security service that protects your Azure virtual network resources. It's a fully stateful firewall as a service with built-in high availability and unrestricted cloud scalability. You can centrally create, enforce, and log application and network connectivity policies across subscriptions and virtual networks. Azure Firewall uses a static public IP address for your virtual network, resources allowing outside firewalls to identify traffic originating from your virtual network. The service is fully integrated with Azure Monitor for logging and analytics. To learn about Azure Firewall features, see Azure Firewall features. Next question. After taking a lot of courses and understanding cloud fundamentals, you have realized that migrating your business resources to Azure makes the most sense. Based on your understanding, which of the following would you need to create first? Option A, virtual network. Option B, a resource group. Option C, a subscription. Option D, a resource log. And the correct answer is option C, a subscription. Explanation. A subscription needs to be created first and foremost. The Azure account is what lets you access Azure services and Azure subscriptions. It is possible to create multiple subscriptions in our Azure account to create separation for billing or management purposes. In your subscriptions, you can manage resources in resource group. The Azure hierarchy looks like tenancy, subscription, resource, group, resource. Next question. As the lead security engineer of your organization, you are worried that someone may mistakenly delete mission-critical resources in Azure. What can you do to prevent this from accidentally happening? Option A. Use an Azure Virtual Subnet. Option B. Use Azure Monitor to define policies. Option C. Apply the cannot delete lock on the resources. Option D. Apply the do not touch lock on the resources. Option E. Use Azure ExpressRoute. And the correct answer is option C. Apply the cannot delete lock on the resources. Explanation. Applying a delete lock to the resource group will prevent the resources inside it from being deleted. As an administrator, you can lock a subscription, resource group, or resource to prevent other users in your organization from accidentally deleting or modifying critical resources. The lock overrides any permissions the user might have. You can set the lock level to cannot delete or read only. In the portal, the locks are called delete and read only respectively. Number 1. Cannot delete means authorized users can still read and modify a resource, but they can't delete the resource. Number 2. Read-only means authorized users can read a resource, but they can't delete or update the resource. Applying this lock is similar to restricting all authorized users to the permissions granted by the reader role. Next question. You are the lead of a data science team at your organization, and your management wants to utilize cloud capabilities to modernize your work stream. What should the company use to build, test, and deploy predictive analytics solutions? Option A, Azure Batch. Option B, Azure Logic Apps. Option C, Azure Machine Learning Studio. Option D, Azure App Service. And the correct answer is option C, Azure Machine Learning Studio. Explanation. From the official docs, Azure Machine Learning Studio is an enterprise-grade service for the end-to-end machine learning lifecycle. It empowers data scientists and developers to build, deploy, and manage high-quality models faster and with confidence. It accelerates time to value with industry-leading machine learning operations, open source interoperability and integrated tools, innovate on a secure, trusted platform designed for responsible AI applications in machine learning. Next question. It's possible to deploy an Azure VM from a macOS-based system by using which of the following options? Option A, Azure Portal. Option B, Azure PowerShell. Option C, Azure Cloud Shell. Option D, Azure CLI. And the correct answer is option A, Azure Portal. Option B, Azure PowerShell. Option C, Azure Cloud Shell. And option D, Azure CLI. Explanation. All of the above can be used to manage Azure resources on a Mac OS-based system. Azure Portal available for all operating systems. Azure CLI available for Mac OS, Windows and Linux. Azure PowerShell available to install on Mac OS, Windows, Linux, Docker and ARM. Azure Cloud Shell. Azure Cloud Shell is an interactive, authenticated browser-accessible shell for managing Azure resources. It provides the flexibility of choosing the shell experience that best suits the way you work, either Bash or PowerShell. Next question. Azure strives to ensure a minimum distance of miles between data centers in enabled regions, although it isn't possible across all geographies. Option A, 500. Option B, 200. Option C, 300. Option D, 400. And the correct answer is option C, 300. Explanation. From the official Azure docs, Azure strives to ensure a minimum distance of 300 miles, 483 kilometers, between data centers in enabled regions, although it isn't possible across all geographies. Data center separation reduces the likelihood that natural disaster, civil unrest, power outages, or physical network outages can affect multiple regions. Isolation is subject to the constraints within a geography, such as geography size, power, or network infrastructure availability and regulations. Next question. You are required to seamlessly connect two virtual networks in Azure without a lot of hassle. Which of the following services would make sense to use? Option A, Virtual Network Peering. Option B, Virtual Network Connector. Option C, Virtual Network Subnets. Option D, Virtual Network Integration Service. And the correct answer is option A, Virtual Network Peering. Explanation. From the official Azure documentation, Virtual Network Peering enables you to seamlessly connect two or more virtual networks in Azure. The virtual networks appear as one for connectivity purposes. The traffic between virtual machines in paired virtual networks uses the Microsoft backbone infrastructure. Like traffic between virtual machines in the same network, traffic is routed through Microsoft's private network only. Azure supports the following types of peering. Number 1. Virtual network peering, connecting virtual networks within the same Azure region. Number 2. Global virtual network peering, connecting virtual networks across Azure regions. Question 138. Dash is made up of one or more data centers equipped with independent power, cooling, and networking. It is set up to be an isolation boundary. If one zone goes down, the other continues working. Option A, scale set. Option B, availability zone. Option C, database racks. Option D, reason. And the correct answer is option B, availability zone. Explanation from the official Azure documentation. Next question. Which of the following is the strongest way to protect sensitive customer data? Option A, encrypt the data in transit. Option B, don't store sensitive data at all. Option C, encrypt the data at rest. Option D, encrypt the data both at rest and in transit. And the correct answer is option D, encrypt the data both at rest and in transit. Explanation from the official Azure docs. To help protect data in the cloud, you need to account for the possible states in which your data can occur and what controls are available for that state. Best practices for Azure data security and encryption relate to the following data states. Number 1. At rest. This includes all information storage objects, containers, and types that exist statically on physical media, whether magnetic or optical disk. Number 2. In transit. When data is being transferred between components, locations, or programs, it's in transit. Examples are transfer over the network, across a service bus, from on-premises to cloud and vice versa, including hybrid connections such as ExpressRoute, or during an input or output process. Next question. For all cloud deployment types, you own your dash and dash. You're also responsible for their security. Option A, information and network controls. Option B, devices and operating system. Option C, data and identities. Option D, data and physical network. And the correct answer is option C, data and identities. Explanation from the official Azure documentation. As you consider and evaluate public cloud services, it's critical to understand the shared responsibility model and which security tasks are handled by the cloud provider and which tasks are handled by you. The workload responsibilities vary depending on whether the workload is hosted on software as a service, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, or in an on-premises data center. Division of responsibility in an on-premises data center, you own the whole stack. As you move to the cloud, some responsibilities transfer to Microsoft. The following diagram illustrates the areas of responsibility between you and Microsoft according to the type of deployment of your own stack. For all cloud deployment types, you own your data and identities. You are responsible for protecting the security of your data and identities, on-premises resources, and the cloud components you control, which varies by service type. Regardless of the type of deployment, the following responsibilities are always retained by you. A. Data. B. Endpoints. C. Account. D. Access management. Next question. A recent unapproved size change to one of the virtual machines in your company has led to a huge unexpected bill. Which of the following services can help you identify the user who made this unapproved change? Option A, Azure Event Hubs. Option B, Azure Activity Log. Option C, Azure Service Health. Option D, Azure Xamarin. Option E, Azure Information Protection, AIP. And the correct answer is option B, Azure Activity Log. Explanation from the official Azure documentation. The Azure Monitor Activity Log is a platform log in Azure that provides insight into subscription-level events. The activity log includes information like when a resource is modified or a virtual machine is started. You can view the activity log in the Azure portal or retrieve entries with PowerShell and the Azure CLI. This article provides information on how to view the activity log and send it to different destinations. Next question. Azure Service Health has the ability to configure cloud alerts to notify you about active and upcoming service issues. Option A, no. Option B, yes. And the correct answer is option B, yes. Explanation. From the official Azure documentation, Azure Service Health notifies you about Azure service incidents and plant maintenance so you can take action to mitigate downtime. Configure customizable cloud alerts and use your personalized dashboard to analyze health issues, monitor the impact to your cloud resources, get guidance and support, and share details and updates. Next question. Which of the following is a good uses of tags? Option A. To help identify the assets required to support a single workload. Option B. Using tags to quickly locate resources associated with specific workloads, environments, ownership groups, or other important information. Option C. Making business groups aware of cloud resource consumption requires IT to understand the resources and workloads each team is using. Option D. All of these. Option E. Using tags for data classification. And the correct answer is option D. All of these. Explanation. All of the above can help leverage the power of tags in one way or the other. From the official Azure docs, organizing cloud-based resources is a crucial task for IT, unless you only have simple deployments. Use naming and tagging standards to organize your resources for the following reasons. Number 1. Resource management. Your IT teams need to quickly locate resources associated with specific workloads, environments, ownership groups, or other important information. Organizing resources is critical to assigning organizational roles and access permissions for resource management. Number 2. Cost management and optimization. Making business groups aware of cloud resource consumption requires IT to understand the resources and workloads each team is using. Number 3. Operations management. Visibility for the operations management team about business commitments and SLAs is an important aspect of ongoing operations. For operations to be managed well, tagging for mission criticality is required. Number 4. Security. Classification of data and security impact is a vital data point for the team when breaches or other security issues arise. To operate securely, tagging for data classification is required. Number 5. Governance and regulatory compliance. Maintaining consistency across resources helps identify changes from agreed upon policies. Prescriptive guidance for resource tagging demonstrates how one of the following patterns can help when deploying governance practices. Similar patterns are available to evaluate regulatory compliance using tags. Number 6. Automation. A proper organizational scheme allows you to take advantage of automation as part of resource creation, operational monitoring, and the creation of DevOps processes. It also makes resources easier for IT to manage. Number 6. Workload optimization. Tagging can help identify patterns and resolve broad issues. Tag can also help identify the assets required to support a single workload. Tagging all assets associated with each workload enables deeper analysis of your mission-critical workloads to make sound architectural decisions. Next question. Which of the following is a free tool to conveniently manage your Azure Cloud storage resources from your desktop? Option A. Azure Migrate. Option B. Azure AzCopy. Option C. Azure Storage Explorer. Option D. Azure Data Box. Option E. Azure File Sync. And the correct answer is option C. Azure Storage Explorer. Explanation. From the official Azure documentation, Azure Storage Explorer is a free tool to conveniently manage your Azure cloud storage resources from your desktop. Next question. Dash is the process of verifying a user's credentials. Option A, authentication. Option B, authorization. Option C, federation. Option D, ticketing. And the correct answer is option A, authentication. Explanation. Authentication is the process of establishing the identity of a person or service looking to access a resource. It involves the act of challenging a party for legitimate credentials and provides the basis for creating a security principle for identity and access control use. It establishes if they are who they say they are. Authorization is the process of establishing what level of access an authenticated person or service has. It specifies what data they are allowed to access and what they can't do it. Next question. A resource can only access other resources in the same resource group. Option A, yes. Option B, no. And the correct answer is option B, no. Explanation. From the official Azure documentation, a resource can connect to resources in other resource groups. This scenario is common when the two resources are related but don't share the same lifecycle. For example, you can have a web app that connects to a database in a different resource group. Next question. Azure Advisor provides a cloud score to assess how well architected your workloads are and can also provide a step-by-step guidance and quick actions for fast remediation. Option A, no. Option B, yes. And the correct answer is option B, yes. Explanation. From the official Azure documentation, Azure Advisor helps in quick and easy optimization of your Azure deployments. Azure Advisor analyzes your configurations and uses telemetry and offers personalized, actionable recommendations to help you optimize your Azure resources for reliability, security, operational excellence, performance, and cost. Next question. Which of the following Azure storage would you use to store different types of files such as videos, audios, text in a highly cost-effective and scalable manner? Option A, Azure PostgreSQL. Option B, Azure Cosmos DB. Option C, Azure Blob Storage. Option D, Azure SQL Database. And the correct answer is option C, Azure Blob Storage. Explanation. From the official Azure documentation, a blob is a binary large object and a storage option for any type of data that you want to store in a binary format. Learn about blob types. Azure Blob Storage is Microsoft's object storage solution for the cloud. Blob storage is optimized for storing massive amounts of unstructured data. Unstructured data is data that doesn't adhere to a particular data model or definition, such as text or binary data. Blob storage is designed for number 1. Serving images or documents directly to a browser. Number 2. Storing files for distributed access. Number 3. Streaming video and audio. Number 4. Writing to log files. Number 5. Storing data for backup and restore, disaster recovery and archiving. Number 6. Storing data for analysis by an on-premises or Azure-hosted service. Next question. Microsoft Azure services operated by Dash in China. Option A, Xiaomi. Option B, 21 ViaNet. Option C, Morgan Stanley. Option D, Alibaba. And the correct answer is option B, 21 ViaNet. Explanation. Microsoft Azure, operated by 21 ViaNet, is the first international public cloud service that has been commercialized in China in compliance with Chinese laws and regulations. Next question. Suppose the lead architect in your company has asked your team to implement a IaaS-based solution in Azure for a quick proof of concept to senior management. One of your colleagues goes ahead and creates an Azure virtual network and 3 Azure virtual machines. Would you agree with this implementation? Option A, no. Option B, yes. And the correct answer is option B, yes. Explanation. Azure virtual machines and Azure virtual networks both fall under the IaaS category, and therefore this solution would meet the lead architect's ask. Next question. A dash can enable branch offices to share sensitive information between locations. Option A, bridge. Option B, bastion. Option C, VPN. Option D, DNS. And the correct answer is option C, VPN. Explanation. From the official Azure documentation, VPNs use an encrypted tunnel within another network. They are typically deployed to connect two or more trusted private networks to one another over an untrusted network, typically the public internet. Traffic is encrypted while traveling over the untrusted network to prevent eavesdropping or other attacks. VPNs can enable branch offices to share sensitive information between locations. For example, let's say that your offices on the East Coast region of North America need to access your company's private customer data, which is stored on servers that are physically located in a West Coast region. A VPN can connect your East Coast offices to your West Coast servers, allowing your company to securely access your private customer data. Question 153. Which tab of the Azure pricing calculator would you use to calculate your estimate? Option A, storage. Option B, estimate. Option C, machines. Option D, products. And the correct answer is option D, products. Explanation. The products tab allows us to choose certain services and configure a solution. We then get an estimated cost for deploying our solution. Next question. What is network latency? Option A, the time it takes for data to travel over the network. Option B, the maximum amount of data that can travel over the network. Option C, the distance the data travel over the network. Option D, the cost incurred by the data traveling over the network. And the correct answer is option A, the time it takes for data to travel over the network. Explanation. Network latency is the time it takes for data or a request to go from the source to the destination. Latency in networks is measured in milliseconds. Next question. Azure Dash is an authorization system built on Azure Resource Manager that provides fine-grained access management to Azure resources. Option A, locks. Option B, resource groups. Option C, role-based access control RBAC. Option D, policies. And the correct answer is option C, role-based access control. Explanation. From the official Azure docs, access management for cloud resources is a critical function for any organization that is using the cloud. Azure role-based access control helps you manage who has access to Azure resources, what they can do with those resources, and what areas they have access to. Azure RBAC is an authorization system built on Azure Resource Manager that provides fine-grained access management to Azure resources. What can you do with Azure RBAC? Here are some examples of what you can do with Azure RBAC. Number 1. Allow one user to manage virtual machines in a subscription and another user to manage virtual networks. Number 2. Allow a DBA group to manage SQL databases in a subscription. Number 3. Allow a user to manage all resources in a resource group, such as virtual machines, websites, and subnets. Number 4. Allow an application to access all resources in a resource group. Next question. You can link virtual networks together by using dash. Option A, Virtual Network Hub. Option B, Virtual Network Seeding. Option C, Virtual Network Proxy. Option D, Virtual Network Peering. And the correct answer is option D, Virtual Network Peering. Explanation. From the official Azure documentation, you can link virtual networks together by using virtual network peering.
Peering enables resources in each virtual network to communicate with each other. These virtual networks can be in separate regions, which allows you to create a global interconnected network through Azure. User-defined routes (UDR) are a significant update to Azure's virtual networks that allows for greater control over network traffic flow. This method allows network administrators to control the routing tables between subnets within a VNet, as well as between VNets. Next question. Dash is a bridge that extends the Azure platform to help you build applications and services with the flexibility to run across data centers, at the edge, and in multi-cloud environments. It also simplifies governance and management by delivering a consistent multi-cloud and on-premises management platform. Option A, Azure DNS. Option B, Azure Bridge. Option C, Azure Sentinel. Option D, Azure Arc. And the correct answer is option D, Azure Arc. Explanation from the official Azure documentation. Azure Arc is a bridge that extends the Azure platform to help you build applications and services with the flexibility to run across data centers, at the edge, and in multi-cloud environments. Develop cloud-native applications with a consistent development, operations, and security model. Azure Arc runs on both new and existing hardware, virtualization and Kubernetes platform, IoT devices, and integrated systems. Today, companies struggle to control and govern increasingly complex environments that extend across data centers, multiple clouds, and edge. Each environment and cloud possesses its own set of management tools, and new DevOps and IT Ops operational models can be hard to implement across resources. Azure Arc simplifies governance and management by delivering a consistent multi-cloud and on-premises management platform. Next question. Which of the following is the mission-critical cloud deployment available only to US federal, state, local, and tribal governments and their partners? Option A, Azure Government. Option B, Azure Nation. Option C, ISO. Option D, Azure Federal. And the correct answer is option A, Azure Government. Explanation from the official Azure documentation. Azure Government is the mission-critical cloud delivering breakthrough innovation to US government customers and their partners. Only US federal, state, local, and tribal governments and their partners have access to this dedicated instance, operated by screened US citizens. Azure Government offers the broadcast level of certifications of any cloud provider to simplify even the most critical government compliance requirements. Next question. Your streaming website experiences a burst of heavy traffic whenever you launch a new web series, but relatively moderate traffic on other days. Which of the following would be a great benefit if you migrate your setup to Azure? Option A, high availability. Option B, elasticity. Option C, load balancing. Option D, low latency. And the correct answer is option B, elasticity. Explanation from the official Azure docs. Elastic computing is the ability to quickly expand or decrease computer processing, memory, and storage resources to meet changing demands without worrying about capacity planning and engineering for peak uses. Typically controlled by system monitoring tools, elastic computing matches the amount of resources allocated to the amount of resources actually needed without disrupting operations. With cloud elasticity, a company avoids paying for unused capacity or idle resources and doesn't have to worry about investing in the purchase or maintenance of additional resources and equipment. Next question. Dash is a workflow-based risk assessment tool that helps you track, assign, and verify your organization's regulatory compliance activities related to Microsoft Cloud Services. Option A, Compliance Manager from the Service Trust portal. Option B, the TCO portal. Option C, the Microsoft Community Forums website. Option D, the Azure Arc portal. And the correct answer is option A, Compliance Manager from the Service Trust portal. Explanation. Compliance Manager in the Service Trust portal is a workflow-based risk assessment tool that helps you track, assign, and verify your organization's regulatory compliance activities related to Microsoft Cloud services, such as Microsoft 365, Dynamics 365, and Azure. There is nothing called Alpha Blade in Azure. Next question. You can use Azure DNS to buy a domain name. Option A, yes. Option B, no. And the correct answer is option B, no. Explanation. From the official Azure documentation, Azure DNS is a hosting service for DNS domains that provides name resolution by using Microsoft Azure infrastructure. By hosting your domains in Azure, you can manage your DNS records by using the same credentials, APIs, tools, and billing as your other Azure services. You can't use Azure DNS to buy a domain name. For an annual fee, you can buy a domain name by using App Service Domains or a third-party domain name registrar. Your domains there can be hosted in Azure DNS for record management. For more information, see Delegate a Domain to Azure DNS. Next question. A startup has deployed a set of virtual machines which are critical for their day-to-day operations. They need to ensure their availability even if a single data center goes down. One of their interns has suggested that deploying these VMS using a scale set would solve the problem. Do you agree? Option A, yes. Option B, no. And the correct answer is option B, no. Explanation. This answer does not specify that the scale set will be configured across multiple data centers, so this solution doesn't meet the goal. Azure Virtual Machine Scale Sets let you create and manage a group of load-balanced VMS. The number of VM instances can automatically increase or decrease in response to demand or a defined schedule. Scale sets provide high availability to your applications and allow you to centrally manage, configure, and update many VMS. Virtual machines in a scale set can be deployed across multiple update domains and fault domains to maximize availability and resilience to outages due to data center outages and planned or unplanned maintenance events. Next question. Dash copies your data synchronously across 3 Azure availability zones in the primary region for applications requiring high availability. Option A, Planet Redundant Storage, PRS. Option B, Locally Redundant Storage, LRS. Option C, Zone Redundant Storage, ZRS. Option D, Geo Zone Redundant Storage, GZRS. And the correct answer is option C, Zone Redundant Storage, ZRS. Explanation. From the official Azure documentation, data in an Azure storage account is always replicated 3 times in the primary region. Azure Storage offers 2 options for how your data is replicated in the primary region. Number 1. Locally redundant storage copies your data synchronously 3 times within a single physical location in the primary region. LRS is the least expensive replication option, but isn't recommended for applications requiring high availability or durability. Number 2. Zone redundant storage copies your data synchronously across 3 Azure availability zones in the primary region. For applications requiring high availability, Microsoft recommends using ZRS in the primary region and also replicating to a secondary region. Number 3. GeoZone redundant storage combines the high availability provided by redundancy across availability zones with protection from regional outages provided by geo-replication. Data in a GZRS storage account is copied across 3 Azure availability zones in the primary region and is also replicated to a secondary geographic region for protection from regional disasters. Next question. A network security group NSG has the ability to encrypt data at rest and in transit. Option A, no. Option B, yes. And the correct answer is option A, no. Explanation. No. A network security group does not encrypt traffic. From the official Azure documentation, you can use an Azure network security group to filter network traffic to and from Azure resources in an Azure virtual network. A network security group contains security rules that allow or deny inbound network traffic to or outbound network traffic from several types of Azure resources. For each rule, you can specify source and destination, port, and protocol. You may read more about encryption here. Next question. What is the maximum number of virtual network rules and IP network rules allowed per storage account in Azure? Option A, 200. Option B, 300. Option C, 500. Option D, 150. And the correct answer is option A, 200. Explanation. The current maximum number of virtual networks per storage account are 200. Next question. Which of the following services allows you to easily run popular open source frameworks, including Apache Hadoop, Spark, and Kafka for open source analytics? Option A, Azure Cosmos DB. Option B, Azure Cognitive Services. Option C, Azure S3 Insight. Option D, Azure Data Lake Analytics. And the correct answer is option D, Azure Data Lake Analytics. Explanation. Very important. From the official Azure docs, we can easily run popular open source frameworks, including Apache Hadoop, Spark, and Kafka, using Azure SD Insight, a cost-effective enterprise-grade service for open source analytics. Effortlessly process massive amounts of data and get all the benefits of the broad open source ecosystem with the global scale of Azure. Many people get confused between Azure SD Insight and Azure Databricks. Number 1. Azure HD Insight brings both Hadoop and Spark under the same umbrella and enables enterprise to manage both using the same set of tools, that is, using Ambari, Apache Ranger, etc. It also offers industry-standard notebook experience with support for both Jupyter and Zeppelin notebooks. Enterprises that want this ease of manageability across all their big data workloads can choose to use HD Insight. Number 2. Azure Databricks is a premium Spark offering that is ideal for customers who want their data scientists to collaborate easily and run their Spark-based workloads efficiently and at industry-leading performance. Azure Databricks is a Apache Spark-based analytics platform optimized for the Microsoft Azure Cloud Services platform. For more details, refer to Azure Databricks documentation. Next question. The members of your organization have been complaining about having to enter their password too many times, which is frustrating. Moreover, users also tend to forget their passwords, which leads to reset overhead. Which of the following services in Azure can help with this? Option A, Azure Arc. Option B, Azure Active Directory Passwordless. Option C, Azure Active Directory Seamless Auth. Option D, Azure ExpressRoute. And the correct answer is option B, Azure Active Directory Passwordless. Explanation. From the official Azure documentation, features like multi-factor authentication are a great way to secure your organization, but users often get frustrated with the additional security layer on top of having to remember their passwords. Passwordless authentication methods are more convenient because the password is removed and replaced with something you have, plus something you are or something you know. Each organization has different needs when it comes to authentication. Microsoft Global Azure and Azure Government offer the following 3 passwordless authentication options that integrate with Azure Active Directory. Number 1, Windows Hello for Business. Number 2, Microsoft Authenticator. Number 3, FIDO2 security keys. You can also allow your employee's phone to become a passwordless authentication method. You may already be using the Authenticator app as a convenient multi-factor authentication option, in addition to a password. You can also use the Authenticator app as a passwordless option. Question 168. Dash is a set of capabilities in Azure Active Directory that enables organizations to secure and manage any outside user, including customers and partners. And the options are A. External identities, B. External user management, C. Sentinel, D. External profiles. And the correct answer is option A. External identities. Explanation. From the official Azure documentation, external identities is a set of capabilities that enables organizations to secure and manage any external user, including customers and partners. Building on B2B collaboration, external identities gives you more ways to interact and connect with users outside your organization. Next question. Azure Service Health allows us to define the critical resources that should never be impacted due to outages and downtimes. And the options are A. Yes, B. No, and the correct answer is option B. No. Explanation. From the official Azure documentation, Azure Service Health notifies you about Azure service incidents and plant maintenance so you can take action to mitigate downtime. Configure customizable cloud alerts and user personalized dashboard to analyze health issues, monitor the impact to your cloud resources, get guidance and support, and share details and updates. Although you can see when a maintenance is planned and act accordingly to migrate a VM if needed. You can't prevent service failures. Next question. Which Azure service should you use to store certificates? And the options are A. Azure Key Vault, B. Azure Information Protection, C. Azure Security Center, D. An Azure Storage Account. And the correct answer is option A. Azure Key Vault. Explanation. From the official Azure documentation, Azure Key Vault helps solve the following problems. Number 1. Secrets management. Azure Key Vault can be used to securely store and tightly control access to tokens, passwords, certificates, API keys, and other secrets. Number 2. Key management. Azure Key Vault can also be used as a key management solution. Azure Key Vault makes it easy to create and control the encryption keys used to encrypt your data. Number 3. Certificate management. Azure Key Vault is also a service that lets you easily provision, manage, and deploy public and private transport layer security or secure sockets layer certificates for use with Azure and your internal connected resources. Azure Key Vault has 2 devices tiers, Standard, which encrypts with a software key, and a Premium tier, which includes Hardware Security Module HSM protected keys. Next question. Dash is a hosting service for domain name system domains that provides name resolution by using Microsoft Azure infrastructure. And the options are A. Azure ExpressRoute, B. Azure Virtual Subnets, C. Azure DNS, D. Azure VPN Gateway. And the correct answer is option C. Azure DNS. Explanation. From the official Azure documentation, Azure DNS is a hosting service for DNS domains that provides name resolution by using Microsoft Azure infrastructure. By hosting your domains in Azure, you can manage your DNS records by using the same credentials, APIs, tools, and billing as your other Azure services. You can't use Azure DNS to buy a domain name. For an annual fee, you can buy a domain name by using App Service Domains or a third-party domain name registrar. Your domains then can be hosted in Azure DNS for record management. For more information, see Delegate a Domain to Azure DNS. Next question. An Azure dash is a connection between 2 Azure regions within the same geographic region for disaster recovery purposes. And the options are A. Geography, B. Availability zone, C. Region pair, D. Region.
And the correct answer is option C, reason pair. Explanation. From the official Azure documentation, regional pairs are two connected Azure regions for disaster recovery within the same geography. Many organizations require both high availability provided by availability zones that are also supported with protection from large-scale phenomena and regional disasters. As discussed in the resiliency overview, for regions and availability zones, Azure regions are designed to offer protection against local disaster with availability zones. But they can also provide protection from regional or large geography disaster with disaster recovery by making use of another region that uses cross-region replication. To ensure customers are supported across the world, Azure maintains multiple geographies. These discrete demarcations define a disaster recovery and data residency boundary across one or multiple Azure regions. Cross-region replication is one of several important pillars in the Azure business continuity and disaster recovery strategy. Cross-region replication builds on the synchronous replication of your applications and data that exist by using availability zones within your primary Azure region for high availability. Cross-region replication asynchronously replicates the same applications and data across other regions for disaster recovery protection. Next question. ExpressRoute connections go over the public internet and they offer more reliability, faster speeds and lower latencies than typical internet connections. And the options are A. Yes, B. No. And the correct answer is option B. No. Explanation. No, it is false that ExpressRoute connections go over the public internet. They do offer more reliability, faster speeds and lower latencies than typical internet connections. From the official Azure documentation, all incoming data into Azure using ExpressRoute is free of charge, as with any other inbound data transfer to Azure. Next question. Dash is a command line utility that you can use to copy blobs or files to or from a storage account. And the options are A. AzCopy, B. AzMove, C. AzReplicate, D. AzMigrate. And the correct answer is option A. AzCopy. Explanation. AzCopy is a command line utility that you can use to copy blobs or files to or from a storage account. Next question. Dash notifies you about Azure service incidents and plant maintenance so you can take action to mitigate downtime. And the options are A. Azure Kiosk Studio, B. Azure Percept, C. Azure Health Bot, D. Azure Service Health. And the correct answer is option D. Azure Service Health. Explanation. From the official Azure documentation, Azure Service Health notifies you about Azure service incidents and plant maintenance so you can take action to mitigate downtime. Configure customizable cloud alerts and use your personalized dashboard to analyze health issues, monitor the impact to your cloud resources, get guidance and support, and share details and updates. Next question. Upon applying a tag to a resource group, all resources inside it inherit that tag. And the options are A. Yes, B. No. And the correct answer is option B. No. Explanation. Important question. From the official documentation, tags applied to the resource group or subscription aren't inherited by the resources. To apply tags from a subscription or resource group to the resources, see Azure Policies tags. Next question. Dash devices can easily move data to Azure when busy networks aren't an option. And the options are A. Azure Storage Explorer, B. Azure Migrate, C. Azure Data Box, D. Azure File Sync. And the correct answer is option C, Azure Data Box. Explanation. From the official Azure documentation, Azure Data Box devices easily move data to Azure when busy networks aren't an option. Move large amounts of data to Azure when you are limited by time, network availability, or cost using common copy tools such as RoboCopy. All data is AES encrypted and the devices are wiped clean after upload in accordance with NIST Special Publication 800-88 Revision 1 standards. Next question. Which of the following are valid Azure purchasing options? And the options are A. Microsoft Partner, B. GitHub Website, C. Microsoft Representative, D. Azure Website. And the correct answer is option A. Microsoft Partner, C. Microsoft Representative, and option D. Azure Website. Explanation. You can choose the purchasing option that works best for your organization or use any of the options simultaneously. Next question. Is possible to deploy a new Azure VM from a Google Chromebook by using Power Automate? And the options are A. Yes, B. No, and the correct answer is option B. No. Explanation. Tricky question. Power Automate is not the same as PowerShell. Power Automate isn't a part of Azure. It falls under the Microsoft umbrella of offerings, just like Power Apps. Hence, this statement is definitely false. You can use the Azure portal to provision virtual machines or even the CLI. Next question. Your company makes use of several SQL databases. However, you want to increase their efficiency because of varying and unpredictable workloads. Which of the following can help you with this? And the options are A. Reason pairs, B. Resource tags, C. Scale sets, D. Elastic pools. And the correct answer is option D. Elastic pools. Explanation. Just like Azure VM scale sets are used with VMS, you can use elastic pools with Azure SQL databases. SQL database elastic pools are a simple, cost-effective solution for managing and scaling multiple databases that have varying and unpredictable usage demands. The databases is an elastic pool are on a single Azure SQL database server and share a set number of resources at a set price. Elastic pools in Azure SQL database enable SaaS developers to optimize the price performance for a group of databases within a prescribed budget, while delivering performance elasticity for each database. Next question. You are the lead architect of your organization. One of the teams has a requirement to copy hundreds of TBs of data to Azure storage in a secure and efficient manner. The data can be ingested one time or an ongoing basis for archival scenarios. Which of the following would be a good solution for this use case? And the options are A. Azure Data Box, B. Azure Data Lake Storage, C. Azure File Sync, D. Azure Cosmos DB. And the correct answer is option B. Azure Data Lake Storage. Explanation. From the official Azure documentation, Azure Data Box Gateway is a storage solution that enables you to seamlessly send data to Azure. This article provides you an overview of the Azure Data Box Gateway solution benefits, key capabilities, and the scenarios where you can deploy this device. Data Box Gateway is a virtual device based on a virtual machine provisioned in your virtualized environment or hypervisor. The virtual device resides in your premises and you write data to it using the NFS and SMB protocols. The device then transfers your data to Azure blob, page blob, or Azure files. Use cases. Data Box Gateway can be leveraged for transferring data to the cloud, such as cloud archival, disaster recovery, or if there is a need to process your data cloud scale. Here are the various scenarios where Data Box Gateway can be used for data transfer. Number 1. Cloud archival. Copy hundreds of TBs of data to Azure storage using Data Box Gateway in a secure and efficient manner. The data can be ingested one time or an ongoing basis for archival scenarios. Number 2. Continuous data ingestion. Continuously ingest data into the device to copy to the cloud, regardless of the data size. As the data is written to the gateway device, the device uploads the data to Azure storage. Number 3. Initial bulk transfer followed by incremental transfer. Use Data Box for the bulk transfer in an offline mode, initial seed, and Data Box Gateway for incremental transfers, ongoing feed over the network. Next question. Which of the following endpoints for a managed instance enables data access to your managed instance from outside a virtual network? And the options are A. Private, B. Hybrid, C. External, D. Public. And the correct answer is option D. Public. Explanation. Public endpoint for a managed instance enables data access to your managed instance from outside the virtual network. You are able to access your managed instance from multi-tenant Azure services like Power BI, Azure App Service, or an on-premises network. By using the public endpoint on a managed instance, you do not need to use a VPN, which can help avoid VPN throughput issues. Thank you for watching this video. Buy our AZ 900 premium questions with 50% off. Check link in the description.